Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, or an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker, and this is going to be a really awesome episode. I'm really excited. But before I get started, I just want to mention it is June 1st, which means we have a new book drawing for this month. And this month's book is Witnessing Miracles, Historical Evidence for the Resurrection and the Book of Mormon, written by my homie, Josh Gailey, evangelist with the Church of Jesus Christ. And this is a fantastic book. Of course, Josh Gailey was one of the speakers at the Book of Mormon Symposium recently in Missouri and is a very good friend. So just remember, in the description, I will have my email address, mormonbookreviews@gmail.com. And in the description, I want you to put in book drawing, say June book drawing, okay, in the subject line, and then give me your full name and address in the email. U.S. residents only. This is the June book drawing, so get it in by the end of the month. All right, here we are, folks. My homie, my bud, my bro, Robert Messick of Book of Mormon Editions. I've been a fanboy of yours for the longest time, and I can safely say it's the only channel that I've watched every single video of. Robert Messick of Book of Mormon Editions, welcome to the program today.
Stephen, you are too kind. Thank you so much for having me again. I love kind of connecting with you and kind of doing these tag teams. It's great being on your channel and kind of sharing the love that you have for the restoration. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and of course, Robert is actually my special co-host. So we're very excited because we have a very special guest. I have to say, last time I was in Missouri, just a couple weeks, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, I guess, Sunday night, going to, it's the Excelsior Springs, Missouri, and President Forsyth, mission president, who oversees all the historic sites in the state of Missouri, okay? He had mentioned to me the day before, 2 days before, have you ever heard of the Stick of Joseph? And I said, well, I've heard of the Stick of Joseph, and I thought he was talking about maybe about this one, the Stick of Joseph book that Never Stuffers book group put out. But he said, no, there's another one. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. So he just mentioned it briefly. And I was like, oh, it's very interesting. And then Sunday afternoon, we run into this gentleman named Keith, who happened to be with Boyd K. Packer's son and his wife. And he was escorting them around and taking them to the mission center. And then that's when I got my introduction with Keith. And then a few hours later, I'm at his house looking at this extraordinary Book of Mormon. But before we get there, Keith, welcome to the program.
What was that?
I said, welcome to the program, Keith.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So it's really cool to have you on, Keith. And I want you to just, before we delve into this particular edition of the Book of Mormon, and I'm going to have Robert ask the first question about the Book of Mormon. But before we do that, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you ended up in Missouri. Tell us a little bit about why you lived in Missouri, because you're originally from out west. And then tell us a little bit of your background, and then we're going to lead up to this extraordinary find.
Okay, my name's Keith Bowen, and I live here in Excelsior Springs, Missouri. Like you said, originally from the West Coast, from Los Angeles. Back in 1979, 1980, I served a mission in the Missouri Independence Mission. So I was sent on my mission here, and I served here for 2 years. And then went back home for a year and a half and decided that I had fallen in love with Missouri. So I came back, and I've been back here basically since then. By trade, I am a school teacher, taught elementary, middle school, high school, and college. I teach ceramic sculpture and art history. Well, I'm married to my wife, and we have 7 children and 12 grandchildren. And that's kind of who I am.
And I want you to tell us a little bit about this foundation, the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation that you founded. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, what the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation is. I'm fortunate to be president of the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation. It's been around for almost 30 years, and it's marked almost 20 some church history sites. Now, the churches will mark their sites on their property, but if it's something that's off their property, they generally don't market, and so what we kind of specialize in is we take tours to some of those sites. We know the landowners, and we mark some of the sites that are not in church property. And we also have a lot of publications that are on here. For many years, we had a newsletter. Like, for instance, this is a newsletter. And what we are, the organization, Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation, are just a group of people, non-denominational, so it's different religions or no religion, and mostly Restoration Church members are in our organization. And we are a group of people that are interested in the education of the Mormons in Missouri in the 1830s. And so we have all kinds of publications and historical events. So we have done newsletters over the years. You'll see these newsletters. We used to sell these over online through the mail. But what we've done is we've developed a website, and everything's free on it. So you can go to our website and you can see all of our newsletters. There's 47 of them, 49 of them, and they have different subjects. And what's unique about this is when you read about a subject, you read it from the perspective of all the different Restoration churches, which I think is a unique perspective together. Another book that's really interesting that's online is basically, this is called The Return Design, written by Bill Curtis. He's one of the ones that founded the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation. And what's really cool about this book, it's online, you can look at it for free, but it documents the return to the church to independence. From they had the mission headquarters in Kansas. They moved to independence around 1900, and it documents all that. We do brochures for history, Mormon history in Missouri. We give these to the visitor centers. And this one here is also another brochure that we have that we give to visitor centers, so people can go there and get them. And this one is for the walking tour. We placed 16 markers in the concrete in the sidewalk, so you can walk around Independence Square area and see all the church history.
Okay, that was you guys that did that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Because so I just remind folks, Rick Bennett, actually of Gospel Tangents, did that walking tour using your materials. So make sure you check out that episode on Gospel Tangents. That's a fantastic thing. I didn't realize you guys put that out. So that is really awesome, dude.
And there's also more of a book, not the brochure, that goes with. And this book has a lot more details to it.
Wow.
And there's other publications that we have, but everything's free online. Everything we do is just by volunteers donating and helping us do markers. And we have 3 or 4 markers right now we're really interested in doing. And we're going to start a kind of a fundraiser campaign here shortly, and to get the money for those markers. We're going to do like Battle of Cricket River, Zion's Camp, maybe the 105 section of the Doctrine and Covenants. We've marked the Hiram Page grave site, the 8 Witness Monument in Liberty, and many of the sites in Richmond, Missouri. The log jail that Joe Smith rebuked the guards in. No one knew where that was. We figured out where that was, and we have marked that. So there's a lot of things we've done.
Wow.
Just go to the website, you'll see a lot of the stuff.
Yes. So we have links in the description to check it out and help them out. Donate to this wonderful organization. They're doing a tremendous work, and it is really exciting that you're working with all the different people of the restoration, which is kind of what this channel is about, is convergence. Now, Robert, I told you you're going to ask the first question, but let's do the lead up. Now, this is the thing. Keith, I want you to hold up this extraordinary find, and I want you to tell us how in the world you got your hands on this copy of the Book of Mormon, which I got to hold just about a week and a half ago.
Okay, so is this what you're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
This is our stick of Joseph. And how I came about it, basically what happened was there was an individual that I, for many years, helped. And you have friends of yours that are, they get it up in age, they get up in their 80s, and they need a lot of help around their house. And so me and my son, we went there quite often, many times a week, to help them for 7 to 8 years. And they went to a rest home, and we didn't do much contact with them. And a common friend of ours came to me and said, Keith, I know you kind of like Book of Mormons, kind of like collecting Book of Mormons. And he was a book dealer. So he brought me a brown paper bag with a rubber band around it. He said, I've had this book for many, many, many years, and I thought you might like it. And that was the Stick of Joseph. He didn't really know what it was. He knew it was a Book of Mormon, but he didn't know really what it was. So after I got it and I did some research on it, I called him back up about 3-4 months after that. I said, you gave me something very rare, possibly something very valuable. And I kind of offered it back to him. And he just kind of laughed and said, Keith, I'm giving you this book because of the service you gave some good friends of ours, and enjoy it. So that's how I came about it. I basically came about it because I was helping other people, serving other people, and someone took note of that and kind of rewards me for the things I was doing.
So we're going to talk a lot about this edition, but Robert, I know you're probably just wanting to pounce here. So ask away.
Yeah. And as a Book of Mormon collector, and my whole channel's developed and dedicated on various copies of the Book of Mormon, this is the only one that I've seen. And so I've tried to do some research on it. And quite frankly, the question I have right up front is, Keith, have you ever seen another copy, or do you know of any other copy that exists on this particular volume?
Well, there was the history of the Lamanites, the Whitmerite. So basically, it's the Whitmerite Book of Mormon is what it is. And the Whitmers did 3 printings. I've seen the first and the second printings, but the third printing, which has the maps in it, which we'll get into, I've not seen. And I've talked to a lot of people that are serious collectors, and they haven't seen them.
So this is the thing. This is the most fascinating thing about this particular edition, folks, is that you had David Whitmer's church produce 2 editions of the Book of Mormon called the Record of the Nephites, or the Nephite Record, and there were 2 editions. And you, doing your research, Keith, realized that this is actually a 3rd edition. We don't know precisely when it was printed, but apparently this church printed a 3rd volume of the Book of Mormon that's also heavily influenced by the newly this new idea that came out of this right around this time period of a limited geography model, a Mesoamerica-based limited geography model by Hills. The gentleman's last name was Hills, who wrote these series of pamphlets about this particular geographic model. And what makes it so unique is that they integrated. Yeah, so hold those up. So those, and you say this is actually, you might have the only 3 complete copies of anywhere else other than at the RLDS archives. Is that correct?
Well, someone that knows a lot about it told me that. Now, I don't know that's true, but it might be. I did find a hard copy recently of this one that was online. I don't know how rare they are. I did see another one on there, but it was fairly expensive for what it is. But yeah, so what happened was, when Hills wrote these in 1914 to 1919, he has maps and illustrations in it. So what happened was, when the Whitmerite Church was doing their 3rd printing, apparently they went to Hills and they asked them, can we put your maps in here? And sure enough, they actually printed the book with the maps and illustrations from the Hills brochures. So the maps that are in here are printed into this. And that's why they changed the name of it. It would have been History of the Nephites, or Nephite Record. But then when they added the maps to it, when they printed it, they changed the name to the Stick of Joseph.
Wow.
So
And
the
so
questions regarding, I was going to say, the questions regarding the Whitmerite Church was in the late 1800s. in and around Richmond, Missouri, and they printed the 1899. It's the Nephite records, and so I've got a copy of the Nephite records. But the question I have is, how long did the Whitmerites last even after, like, the 1899 is kind of their benchmark for their first printing of the Nephite records, and then you say that there's another printing, and then this is your third, but this is kind of, you say, is owned or like originated or published by the Whitmerite Group. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the if that's the first copy of the Nephite record, that'd be 1899.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then there's a second printing, and I'm not an authority on this. I'm just a schmuck here, but I don't know the exact printing of the second one, and we don't know the printing of the Stick of Joseph because it says Independence, Missouri, and it says illustrations by L.E. Hills. So it is printed in here. They're just not inserted in there. It's actually in the printing of the book. And these brochures that we have go from 1914, 15, 17 to 1919. So even though there's no date in here, just by looking at it, what's going on, it's probably 1919, 1920. Because the Whitmerite Church is going to join the Church of Christ. Basically, Hedgekites are going to join them a couple of years later.
So basically, this edition is basically being done right as the church is kind of unraveling and starts getting into the other group. So this is what makes this so unique, because we don't know how many copies did they print? Were they in the middle of a print run and they abandoned it because things were kind of coming apart? So we really don't know how many were printed, when they were printed. What part of the reason, and hold the book up, I want you to hold it up real good, because I want people in the audience to take a good look at this. Okay, so those of you who live in the greater Independence, Missouri area, and you are looking in attics, I want you to look at this edition. And I want to, because I think this episode will also serve as a means of getting the word out about this particular edition. Okay, look for it in your attics, folks. Let's look for it in your bookshelves. This is the only known copy, but we would love to identify other copies of this. So so that would be the other reason too, is we want to kind of get more of a history, because each edition is going to be unique in its own way. Maybe one has a copyright date, maybe one has a little bit more information in it that we can help piece this story together. So the more copies we get, the more complete understanding we could have about this. Is that correct, Keith?
Yes, so I agree with you.
Yeah. And what's also interesting that I really found fascinating with your story, Keith, is that Mr. Hills was actually in the RLDS church, and he was one of the, I was doing some research on him, and he was one of the predominant people that proposed and started really researching the Central American Book of Mormon geography theory. And he did it kind of academically in terms of looking at geography, looking at academic papers that would list various sites, and then kind of overlay a Book of Mormon geography on Central America, Guatemala, South Mexico, things like that. And so it's kind of interesting that the Central America Book of Mormon geography is actually an RLDS theory that was subscribed so much that actually Salt Lake absorbed it later based upon Mr. Hill's proposal for it. But what's interesting is, so you've got RLDS maps that are in a Church of Christ Whitmerite book. And I think that's way amazing, because you have like a cross mix, or you have at least they started developing their relationship so that they could actually share information like that.
And also, if you take, in most of our books of Mormon, our books, we put our names in it, right? There is a name in here, and it is F.L. Hendricks. And there were some Hendricks in the RLDS church in the 1920s. So that's just a side note.
We also have that name. Could you hold up that name to the screen so people can just see this, its spelling and everything like that? Because maybe family might want to see this. All right. So that's it right there. Okay. All right, so that's what's in there. So again, this is just a unique thing that we're describing here, and we get to share with the audience that every page in this is precious and important. Actually, there's one page I do want you to open up to, because somebody did a personal illustration of the Jaredite barges. So maybe you could turn over to Ether and show us that. So obviously one of the owners of this decided they were going to do their own interpretation, and as an artist, you have to appreciate that kind of thing as well.
Of course, I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't prepare for that. So
oh, that's okay.
As we're talking,
take your time. So Robert, what do you think about, you had never heard of anything like this before, Robert? Like you had no idea this Book of Mormon existed. Is that correct?
Correct. So a couple of other things, and I'm not as versed in RLDS churches details and historical details, but what's also interesting is that the Temple Lot group had a split, and you had the origination of the Elijah Message group, and their book is called The Record of the Nephites. And what was interesting is, and I was looking through that, and their front page has the Book of Mormon geography model, and it's it's the map of Mr. Hills's map. And so it's actually been carried through to the Elijah Message book for the Record of the Nephites.
Oh,
and
that's
so
fascinating.
In their soft copy version, they actually include Hills's map in their first front pages. And so once again, it's been carried on till modern times. So
that's another nice, interesting influence that edition probably had on there. But what's also fascinating to me is that according to Adam Stokes, who's an apostle of the Elijah Message, the Church of Christ, the Assured Way group. Okay, I don't have the full name in front of me, but he says that group is officially now a Heartlander group. And so I'm curious about their Record of the Nephites would have that copy of that map in there. I don't know. So hey, did you find it, Keith? The Jaredite barges? Look at that. Come on. That is so cool. And that's really beautifully illustrated. That's so cool. Yeah. This is what makes this so unique.
When I saw that particular picture, it was a little interesting because, some people think, well, if they have 8 barges and they, put them all out in the ocean, they kind of get flown to the wind. And how do they kind of organize to keep landing at the same spot? And if they're all, not say tied together, but they're all connected together. Vessels meant container, not necessarily ship. So it's interesting that there was a very large ship with 8 containers. That makes sense. Or I thought it was interesting a spin to the Jaredite story.
Yeah. There's an interesting drawing of that also. Even he did that drawing, but in one of Hill's books, he has a larger ship with those 8 compartments to it also, where they're tied together. Hills does that also.
Fascinating. So Keith, other question in that that volume has some pictures interlaced within that book. Can you tell us a little bit about the pictures that are in your volume?
The pictures that are in the volume and in the brochures, okay. You'll see that there's maps like this. There's maps like this. And then you're also going to have illustrations. And in the Book of Mormon, the Stick of Joseph is going to have these maps and illustrations in it from the brochure.
And there are illustrations interlaced within the volume, or is it just in the front?
All throughout the book. Oh. They're placed evenly throughout the book.
And then the other question I had was, if you could open up the first Nephi section of the first, between first and second Nephi, how many chapters are we looking at in first Nephi? Because that'll actually tell some interesting thoughts regarding where it came from as well.
Okay, as I do that, I did take a good look at first Nephi 1. Chapter 2, and I noticed that the LDS and the Elijah Message were very similar to, they say it was the language of the Jews, where I noticed the Whitmerite and the RLDS the 1908 RLDS doesn't have the Jews in it. It's like they start making differences at that point. When the when the Whitmerites did 1899, they started changing, and in 1908, when the RLDS did it, they made changes away from it also. But it seems like a lot of the changes, I'm saying this, a lot of research is kind of looking at some things that the Whitmerites and the RLDS were more similar than the LDS.
It sounds to me like there's a lot of cross-pollination going on too.
Yeah,
which is interesting to see that.
Okay, so what is it that you need to know about First Nephi?
First Nephi, how many chapters is in First Nephi?
First Nephi is going to have 7. Let's see, there it is there.
So the First Nephi chapter 7 matches the 1899 Nephite records, and it also matches I believe the RLDS style, because Salt Lake, by Salt Lake's time in 1879, Salt Lake had versified them, or had chaptered themselves to 32 chapters or 29 chapters in First Nephi by Orson Pratt. And so the other interesting kind of part of history was that 1903 is when the Whitmerite Group sold the printer's manuscript to the RLDS Church. So you have this volume that's after the transfer of the printer's manuscript to the RLDS Church. So,
and I find that interesting because you go in, I think 1908, the RLDS comes out with their printing, when you have those with their printing of the Book of Mormon, which I'm assuming, I don't know, it was assuming was influenced by that transaction. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
They received it in 1903, or they made the transaction in 1903, and then by 1908 they made their official printing. That they reviewed the printer's manuscript and then did a new verse set for their 1908 copy. And so 1908 is kind of the huge benchmark in RLDS printing, because they were proud that they got the printer's manuscript.
Do we know how much they paid them for that edition? Do we know how much we actually have a record of that?
I'm sure, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've heard it before, and I don't remember. If I remember, and I just remembering from a long time ago, that they actually came to the LDS Church, and I think they were offering it for $11,000, something like $11,000, $11,000, and the LDS Church said, "No, we don't need it," and turned it down, and then it went to the RLDS Church. So I'm sure it wasn't a massive amount of money. It wasn't $35 million.
Well, I wanted to ask, the witness statements, are the witness statements at the front of the edition or at the back of it?
Okay, we'll take a look here. I'll open it up.
And Robert, explain that in some editions of the Book of Mormon, they're in the front and in the back. Maybe talk a little bit about the history of that.
Yeah, the witness statement in the 1830 edition was in the back, as well as the 1837. It was in the back. Let's see the 1830 edition.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it at the front.
This is all good stuff, folks. We're learning on the fly here about these editions. But yeah, so some Book of Mormons have the 3 witness statements or the 3 and the 8 witness statements at the very beginning of the Book of Mormon, and others have them at the end. And so historically, Robert, with the record of the Nephites, the Whitmerite Church, and the RLDS Church, where did they typically put those witness statements at?
So the first witness statements that were in the beginning of the book, I believe, was in the 1841 Great Britain. Let me look through this and see where on the RLDS, or excuse me, on the golly, where is it? Would you believe that the 1899 doesn't have it?
Oh,
this doesn't have it either.
So we don't have witness statements in either one of these editions of the Book of Mormon. That is fascinating to me. I wonder why they would have done that. Any speculation on either one of your parts on that?
Well, let me make a note here. When I got this, well, back in my bookcase, I have it. In this book, when I got it, you opened it up and it had about 5 or 6 pages in here. And it was the witness statement from a 1908 RLDS Book of Mormon. So if someone at some point of time opened this up, it was a 1908 RLDS Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And that's probably misleaded somebody at one point in the last 100 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Plus, because someone that knows what they're talking about, open it up, and it's a 1908 RLDS, Book of Mormon, Print and Independence.
Oh, yeah. That could
If
have.
someone had gotten the witness statement and just set it in here, it was loose, and set it in there, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have a witness statement.
So even then, a lot of people wouldn't have maybe even had it in their possession if that was in there all that time. They may have not even known this came from the Whitmerite Church. They would have just assumed this was a special RLDS edition as well. So, thus making it even the mystery even more intriguing. That it was kind of hiding its own self from the people. You got something there,
But
Robert?
it was owned by an RLDS.
Yeah.
I think the owner of this book was RLDS.
Oh, yeah.
And at one point, he probably took the witness statement to the RLDS, 1908,
right,
and put it in his stick of Joseph.
That's cool.
That may have what happened.
I'm sure that's it.
So I stand corrected. In the 1899 Nephite records, the testimony of the witnesses is in 1 page, and so it's 1 page, and it's right behind the title page. So it's in the beginning of the book, and I think going from the mid 1800s, they started doing it in the front of the book, going forward as well. Yeah, the 1908 RLDS had at the beginning of the book, so I think it's kind of pretty common by the time that this one's printed that the witnesses pages are in the beginning rather than the end.
Okay. Huh. So so we got so now we've solved that mystery, it looks like, a little bit. Robert, you are actually thinking of you're actually going to be doing an episode for your channel about this particular Book of Mormon. Maybe preview that a little bit too.
Yeah, so I'm working with Keith on getting some pictures and some details regarding it. And what I was really amazed with is the pictures interlaced. I really am impressed with the maps that are bound in this copy, and it's just a fascinating story that this particular copy was an RLDS geography that was printed in a Whitmer book. And so probably in the next little bit, or in the next couple of submissions, I'll make a video on my channel on this one as well.
Okay,
so Keith, thank you for the details. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so look out for that episode in the next couple of weeks. Robert is going to be releasing that, so he's going to give you even more of a description, doing it Book of Mormon edition style, which I always appreciate when you do that. So we'll have some more information there. Keith, how long have you actually had that particular edition of the Book of Mormon?
It seems like it's about 4 years or so. Oh, by the way, if I did see, like I said, I told you online when I have this, I did see one of these online. So if somebody wanted to go Google search it or eBay or whatever, they can find one of the more hardbound ones, which are not as rare as the paper ones, but the hardbound ones. And it does have a map in it. It does have illustrations in it. And it's only 30-some pages. And it's not cheap. By my standards, not cheap. But it is out there. Now, what was the question?
Oh, I had asked you how long you've had it for. And also, just describe to me, your sister, I believe, is somebody who's like a bookbinder, and she actually helped make a special clamshell for it. Maybe talk a little bit about the clamshell she made for it.
Well, she did more than just the clamshell. The clamshell, she thought this was the proper fabric for the book, because she had it for a while, and she got kind of got to know it for a while. And what she did is she restores books. And when I had the stick of Joseph originally, this is all original here. Everything's original. but the binding had been broken and the cover had come off, the pages had come out, and they were loose. So what she did was she took it apart piece by piece, reconstructed it, put it back together, and did do some of the restoration on it. Charlene Matthews is her name, and she lives in Hollywood in Los Angeles, and she's restored some original Book of Mormons and other church books before in the past. And she's highly rated, and it's not cheap, but she is very, very good at it. I've seen a lot of her work over the years. She's done it for about 40 years.
Yeah, it's a beautiful volume. So there has been a little bit of restoration done to it. Okay. And Robert, do you have another question for him?
I wanted to go back to history, and Keith, do you know when the Whitmerite Group kind of merged into other restoration branches, and which branches, and kind of what time frame were we looking at the end of the Whitmerite Group?
You know, we've had descendants of Whitmerites and MMFF, a couple of them in our board, and they're absolutely wonderful, great friends of ours. But what I think the timeline is, again, I can't find anything about it. I can't find a printer. I've gone to Independence looking for another printer that bought the old printer out and has the records. I've looked and looked, but from what I can understand, what I'm guessing is that the Stick of Joseph is 1919, 1920, and I'm not an authority on the restoration churches, but if you just kind of Google basic information, it said about 1924, 25, the Whitmerite Church kind of joined the Church of Christ Temple at Hedrickite Church.
Now, there's no literature that describes this edition anywhere, right? So nobody talks about it or anything like that. Who was the printer of this particular edition? Does it even say who the printer is?
It doesn't say the date or the printer, but it does have printed on the title page, L.E. Hills, illustrations and maps by L.E. Hills. So we know it's just not a Book of Mormon that someone slid in, a few maps and changed the cover. It actually has a printed page with Hills maps in it, which, when you go ahead and you print something, the print one book, to go through the hassle of printing one book, even if it's going to be, a demo piece, it still would be incredibly expensive to do this. So they would have not printed just one, they would have printed multiples. Now, we don't know how many, but it seems to me that it would be crazy to think that they would have done that. They could have built a unique cover for it. Maybe they printed one title page and put it in a Whitmerite one. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like it. I talked to my sister Charlene about it, and she's an antique book dealer, and not only a restorator, but she's dealt in antique books, high-end antique books, for a long, long time, and she just didn't think that it just didn't make any sense to have one printing of it.
Now, did the RLDS church print Hills's books?
Now, what happens is Hills, his books were printed by
because I'm just wondering if maybe that might be a potential printer, that that they could have been using that as a printer.
Well, I've been doing that. I've been calling the different printers in Independence Lambert Moon printers, are the ones that printed different books by Hills. There's another book that I got from them. So we know in the early 20s, I think it's like 23, 24, that Moon did the printing here. But again, I've been asking all the existing printers now, do you know anything of this other print shop? And I'm not getting anywhere right now, but I've just started on that.
Which also means as well, it's kind of interesting that the Stick of Joseph publisher knew Hills enough to put it on their copy, as well as to kind of like a promoter, or, hey, look, we're putting Hills's name on this. So Hills, number one, had to be significant enough in the area to do that, as well as need to be trusted or in other words, it's a mutual benefit. Publishing Hill's name on the Stick of Joseph meant that people who knew Hills would like the Stick of Joseph, and people who knew the Stick of Joseph would go deeper into Hills's research as well. So
I have many publications from Hills I've been picking up over the last 2 or 3 years, different books, and I even have his daughter, I think, his wife or daughter, did a printing of a lot of his works and things like that. So he was quite prominent, especially for, a small town of Independence in the 19s and 20s. He probably was a pretty famous dude.
So the naming of this, it's interesting. It's part of the reason why David Whitmer they kind of wanted to move away from the word Mormon. And so they want to have something record of Nephites. I'm just wondering, have you ever speculated what made them decide to not just call it the record of the Nephites, but to call it the Stick of Joseph? I mean, what do you think was, I mean, it was all speculative at this point, but what do you think they were thinking?
Well, just what I've been thinking. I've had it for 4 or 5 years, and I've thought about it a lot. And I don't know for sure. It's speculation, but I really think is when they had the first two publications, when they added the maps to it, they wanted distinction between the other printings, and that would have been a really easy way to be able to separate instantly separations to that.
that it's a new publication or a new publication as compared to a reprint of something previous.
And maybe to make it more accessible to people outside of their church, that if they're branded one certain way, maybe they wanted to maybe make it appeal to an RLDS audience as well. And what's so fascinating is when you think about it, folks, okay, if there wasn't this guy named Otto Fetting that comes into the scene later in this church, odds are pretty good at this point. The Temple Lot and the RLDS were very friendly with each other. They recognized each other's. The Temple Lot recognized the doctrine and covenants of the RLDS. They were moving towards probably an eventual merger. But then Otto Fetting comes in and does the prophecies, and then it causes there to be the split off. And now the Temple Lot is just kind of, their paths have so greatly diverged. But it just shows you that during this period of time in Independence, there's a lot of cross-pollination going on. There's a lot of swapping going on. So you almost wonder if this Book of Mormon was meant to be for everybody, like kind of an ecumenical Book of Mormon that could span all this areas of all these disagreements, because they were much closer back then. And if a few things happened differently, these groups might have all merged with each other as well in the 1920s and 1930s.
I agree with those statements, because the Stick of Joseph is Whitmerite and it has an RLDS historian, almost like they're together, and they weren't, but obviously they're working together.
Yep. Yep, very true. So I think that's what a fascinating history. Robert, isn't this just so cool? You never would have thought in a million years that we'd find this edition of the Book of Mormon. You never heard of it. You never would. It just came out of left field. You got the call from President Forsyth a few weeks ago. That's the first time you heard about it.
Yeah, and this blows my mind. And kind of the introduction that I had was President Forsyth contacted me through my YouTube channel and said, "Hey, you've got to see this particular copy. It's the Stick of Joseph." I was like, "Oh, I've seen Stick of Joseph before." And like, "No, it's the Stick of Joseph in the 1900s or early 1900s." So like, okay, sparked my interest. And then he referred me to Keith, and Keith, you also kind of contacted me regarding these, and it was just fascinating. I want to say that I'm humble enough that I don't know everything, and I need to kind of remind myself that I don't know everything. And when these new copies come up, it's amazing to say, "Yep, Keith, you get the gold star for the day to show me something that I don't know." So thank you so much.
What's also interesting, if you go online, you can find the Nephite record, the Whitmerite, and then it'll say, and then the third printing was the Stick of Joseph, and it's highlighted in the text, so you touch it and it says, "This page hasn't been developed yet." I can't find anything specifically to the Stick of Joseph. You just make just a couple slight references to it, but there's really no information about it. And that's what I'm hoping about being here today, is that as it goes out there, someone's going to say, "Oh yeah, I have this document, I got this document, I got this book, I got this information, I heard this," so we can find out more about this unique printing of the Book of Mormon.
Yes, and folks, if we get any more information on this, don't worry, Robert and I are going to be right on top of this on this one, and the more this story unfolds. So basically, folks, this is the first time this has been described publicly. We want to get the word out about this edition. People, even in Utah, look in your attic. You just never know. Go use bookstores, look around, scour, look for these kind of things, because I'm sure there's probably other ones out there, and it adds to the narrative, the history of this beautiful. But by the way, a beautiful Book of Mormon. It's really an awesome, unique thing that I got to hold, and part of the reason I wore this shirt, lucky, because I felt very lucky to be able to handle that Book of Mormon, and very blessed. And I want to thank you, Keith, for blessing me, for having me come to your house on a Sunday night at 8:30 and was able to thumb through that thing. It was a real privilege, sir.
Well, it was my pleasure to have you here, and I do appreciate it. And I want you to know that I feel blessed and lucky that I came across it, and very, very fortunate. It's brought a lot of happiness and intrigue to. I do a lot of church history tours, and people will come to my home and we'll start our tour, and I'll show them this and a few other things that I have that are unique, and then we go a couple miles away to Zion's Camp or whatever we go to, and it's always kind of the centerpiece of our tours when someone comes here. It's something that people really enjoy experiencing.
Yeah, folks, beautiful home you have there. Also beautiful artwork. You're an artist, and you and your wife are both artists. And you guys, it's awesome, some of the stuff you have on displayed there. It's really cool. Robert, did you have any more questions about this edition of the Book of Mormon?
Oh, I want to have more questions, and I don't know where to begin. So I think I'm realizing as well that there's probably a couple avenues that I have to research so that I can get even more questions. And so this is kind of a work in progress, and I feel bad that we don't have all the answers, but I guess this is the purpose, to say, hey, we don't have all the answers, but this is what we've got, and let's kind of learn more. So I'm kind of dedicated in learning more about this particular volume as well. So.
And that's the cool thing. Now, real quick, Keith, I wanted to ask you, or was there something you were going to say?
I was going to say something real quick. I'm not trying to do shameless promotion of my website, but on our website we have Ryan Daly, who's a member of the LDS Church in Gallatin, and he has probably the largest collection of Book of Mormons. I think he has 800 printings of the book, different printings of the Book of Mormon in English. And on our website, he did a fireside where we videotaped it, we posted on the website, where he explains a lot of things about the printing of the Book of Mormon, things I didn't even dream of that were possible. I mean, why are they printed in Liverpool? There's a good reason for that. There's a lot of things that he talks about. And it's just, if you're interested in printings of the Book of Mormon, there's that. And there's also, he does another one on printings of the Holy Bible. And it's an amazing one. And then he has a fireside on the pronouns, the names that are used in the Book of Mormon, where their origin is. And it is fascinating, because as the people of the Book of Mormon move from place to place to place to place, the names of their children and the individuals reflect those places. They change, the background of the origination of the names change based on where they move to, which is really interesting. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, the website does have some really, really good firesides on it. The one with Gene Adams, he's one of the top people in the church that know about the temple a lot. You can listen to what he's got to say about it. There's a lot of fascinating videos that are on our website that are free if you want to take a look at them.
Yeah, check those out. And of course, you had said you're going to post this video on that website as well. So we're going to help each other out here. And that's a great thing. I did want to ask you one last question. Is there another Book of Mormon in your collection that kind of like is really special to you?
What I also have here, well, I do. I mean, I had the Kansas City First Edition, which is the first missionary copy of the Book of Mormon in 1901, which I really, really like. But then also, I do have another box. And I know people have these, people know about it. It's not that unique. but I do have a Deseret Alphabet Book of Mormon.
Yay.
Okay, that's what you were thinking about. Okay, the Deseret Alphabet Book of Mormon really is cool. My wife and I were taking a grad class at the University of Missouri, and the professor had his doctorate in immigration and migration of the American West. And so we were taking that class. So my wife, for her paper, she wrote a really nice paper on the Deseret Alphabet. And we really got into that and really kind of researched a lot of that. And it really is, it's special. Not only do we have this one, but we also have basically a Sunday school manual. So this is 1868, and this is 1869. Oh, and by the way, how I got this one was, I think around the 1920s, sometimes a lot of the small communities in Utah were using this language, this language right here. And the church didn't want that. So they kind of compensated all the Book of Mormons as best they could, and they packed them away. And in the mid 1980s, Deseret News found 2 boxes in their basement of these. So just put a little ad. If you want a Deseret Alphabet Book of Mormon, send $5 and we'll send it to you. So that's where I got this one, through spending $5.
That's fantastic. Real quick,
Which
just explain the Deseret Alphabet for those of you who are non-members or aren't familiar. What is the Deseret Alphabet?
What it basically is, in 1868-69, Brigham Young basically didn't want, the German part of Salt Lake City, the Italian part where people spoke different languages and separated. He wanted the church unified into one English language. So it didn't matter where you came from in the world. In about 2 months, you can learn this language. It's a very simple language. And then over a year or two, they would wing you over to English. So as members of the church, they would all be together with one voice. And that's kind of the purpose for it.
Oh, okay. I actually didn't know that it was actually a transitionary language to then transition to English. I had no idea.
From all the different languages to that language to English.
So it's phonetic English. And what's interesting is Mormon, Mormon, there's 2 O's. And the pronunciation on the one is different than the pronunciation on the last. And it's actually Marmon. And so a couple of the commentaries that I've seen is that actually it's a telltale sign of some of the dialect that the Utah members had at that particular time. It was kind of a drawl. And I joke that the people in St. George have that drawl at St. George, and it's Hurricane, Utah, which is right outside of St. George. And so it's Marmon. And actually it's inside the Deseret Alphabet too. So it's really interesting that the phonetics really comes across in this Deseret Alphabet.
Yeah, it's very good. Very good.
That's great. Well, thanks for the tutorial. That is so awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, by the way, you bought that for $5. How much would one of those be going for now?
Last time I saw one on eBay, probably 3 or 4 years, they're around. Used about $800, I think. Now you got to realize, but you got to realize this is where to go.
And Robert, how much have you been seeing them go for?
So eBay has them every other month or so, and usually they come in a set of 3, and the set of 3 is over $1,000. And I think it's a little high, and I don't like them being so high. So, if we watch this video years from now and prices fluctuate, it really doesn't. It changes. But with the inflation that happened in the last 6 months, book prices on eBay has actually gone up a lot more than I expected. I'm extremely surprised about it. So my purchases are kind of bringing reduced, if you will. But what's interesting is on eBay, actually, there is this volume, and it's actually it's a Deseret Alphabet, and it's a reprint out of a printer from India. So they're doing currently it's on eBay, and it's the Deseret Alphabet volume on eBay. And I think it's about $60-$70 on eBay. It is from India, so you can smell it's got the leather smell, but sometimes you can say, yeah, some things that come from India have that Asian smell that's a little different than an American smell of a book printer. And but yeah, it's interesting that they are reprinting a Deseret Alphabet new volume as a reprint. So
okay, now a note about that is this is just First and Second Nephi.
Hmm.
They did print the whole Book of Mormon, which is what that is, and to find those, I mean, it's $5,000 to $8,000 probably. The full Book of Mormon is very expensive,
Correct.
and they're more
And
rare.
the full Book of Mormon, only 500 were printed. And so the one that you have in your hand is through Nephi, through the words of Mormon. And that's the Reader
Right.
Book of Mormon. That was printed in mass. But you're right, that the full volume Book of Mormon is only 500 copies of the original 1869 copy. So yeah, really hard to get, usually through private book dealers. I have not seen any on eBay forever. And so,
I saw one about
this,
5 or 6 years ago. I saw one on eBay, and they
yeah.
wanted 8,000 for it, I think.
Yeah, you're looking at 10 now. So yeah. But it was interesting. This reprint is a good alternative for the poor people like us to get one.
I'm gonna look into that. I need to look that up and do that. That'd be something I'd be interested in picking up. That's a neat reprint to have.
Yeah, that is cool. Hey, Robert, can you do me a favor? Send me a link for that so I can put that in the description. So if people want to check out that particular edition, they can do that as well. Well, this was quite an adventure today, guys. Did you did we have all the questions asked and answered today, Robert? Or I imagine you probably have 50 more you want to ask?
Work in progress, but yeah. Oh, Keith, I did want to not being in Independence. It's always interesting talking to people from Independence, Missouri, and we talked historically that the Temple Lot people, the membership in the Temple Lot Church, the RLDS groups, the Whitmerites kind of merging over, all of the relationships. It's kind of interesting because you're in a foundation that has cross pollination of the individual memberships, and I just wanted to touch base and ask, how is relationships within various organizations or memberships in Independence in general nowadays?
Well, I'll tell you what. When I served my mission here 42 years ago, I noticed I ran into a lot of animosity. I mean, I really did. If we were tracked in and we hit an RLDS home, which we did often, it usually wasn't very pleasant. But that's not the case now. In our organization, I know Cutlerites, I know, from all the different religions. And, I can tell you in the years I've been involved with the MMFF, and we have all these different restoration branches all together, there's never been an argument. There's never been any jealousy or anyone pointing fingers. We really do enjoy each other. We love each other. And it's a great service that we do together. I'm sure there's some people out there somewhere, but I'm finding that when we'll have some of our meetings in Community of Christ buildings, we'll have meetings in Restoration Church buildings, and we enjoy each other's company. We really do. It's things have, I think, changed dramatically the last 40 years.
I
That's
also
awesome.
wonder, does the Missouri Mormon Frontier Foundation, do you guys have annual conferences, or how often do you meet, and talk a little bit about that?
Well, we as a board, we meet, and then we have a historical board. So we have different aspects that meet every month. And we used to meet at the basement of the Liberty Jail for many, 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 many years. But then when COVID hit, we went to Zoom, and we haven't gotten off Zoom yet because we really like not being able to travel. And some of them are getting a little bit older, and they don't drive anymore too. So it's a lot easier to do that. So we have an email list. I don't know, 400 or 500 people, but we'll have events. Matter of fact, back in 2018, we did firesides to the Mormon War. So we did 22 firesides in a short period of a few months, on site, on day, and date of the events that happened. So we would be at the Battle of Crooked River with a fireside there, and then we were, the next. Then we're at the eminence, and then we're at the, the voting in Gallatin. But we moved from place to place, DeWitt, all around. We're moving different places, and it was really amazing to actually sit on the property where the saints were and to say they were here today. They walked through rivers and they went through all kinds of hardship. And 3 days later, they were here and this event happened. And then 4 days later, this event happened. And we did all those firesides. And it was really neat because they were on date, but actually the same day of the week. So it was really special things. We've done a lot of things like that, but I tell you what, it is such a pleasure. I'm so happy I made the decision to come out here years ago. And like I spoke at a stake event, young men's event, a couple of weeks ago, and I asked how many people here from Utah. 60% of the hands went up. So I was talking. Our congregations are splitting. Our ward split a couple times in the last 5 years. Our brand new stake is ready to split again after 5 years. There's that much growth in the church. There's that many people moving out here from the West. It actually is. It's kind of a nice place to be, and I really enjoy it.
You know, I have to say that people ask me, Steve, do you think you'll ever relocate? And the obvious one would be like to Salt Lake, or to Utah. But I say, I can just as easily see me relocating to Independence because you're right in the middle of the country. You can drive out to Utah. You can drive out to Chicago. You're kind of right in the middle of everything. And plus, you get to hang out with all these other cool restoration people. So that's so awesome. I envy you so much, Keith, that you get to be engaged in that world on a daily basis.
Okay, do you want me to share one last thing with you guys?
Sure.
Yay.
kind of unrelated. Now, what happens? You know what I'm going to talk about. It's under my piano. Do you want to mention that real quick?
Oh, sure.
Okay, what happened was a lot of people. What happened was at Hans Mill, there's very few artifacts at Hans Mill. Okay, yes. So what happened was 2 years after the massacre, a local family bought the mill, which was built out of cut stone and had a roof top, but the bottom was all stone because it was in the river. And we have the land purchase records and we have the journal entries of a family that bought the mill, repurposed the stones, and built the foundation of their house out of it. That house burned down and they rebuilt another one. But they had 36 of those stones from the Hans Mill left over. And for 30 years, he wouldn't let anybody have one. You couldn't buy it, you couldn't have one. So what I did was he passed away. I went to his estate sale and I picked up all of, can you see it?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Those are the cut stones from the Hans Mill. So I now have 36 of the cut stones from the Hans Mill. So every once in a while, just by being here and kind of keeping active in different things, like the Stick of Joseph just kind of fell into my hands. The Hans Mill stones just falls into my hands. And I have other artifacts that just by being here and wanting to be active in it has really been a blessing.
Yeah, that is so cool. Well, guys, this was great. Robert, thanks for coming on again to co-host with me.
Thank you so much. And the last thing I'm going to say is, as I study these early printings of the Book of Mormon, these significant things, I'm reminded that we're human, but the message isn't. And I'm so grateful to, have the warm fuzzies and feel good when I know that the message of the Book of Mormon is far more valuable than the vessel it's contained in. But understanding the vessels or understanding kind of the mechanism or the volumes gives more appreciation to the message. And so kind of it goes hand in hand. And I really appreciate kind of studying the printing process of it so that I can kind of deepen my faith in the message and the text itself. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Robert, I really appreciate those comments because, the purpose of the Book of Mormon is bringing souls to Christ. That's it. And it's a great message, and it's wonderful to be able to deal with it. It's like in my life, I teach art history. I make a living of study of beauty. If you choose a job that you really enjoy, you don't have to work a day in your life, right? And that's wonderful. And it's the same situation with MMFF.
Same situation with the Stick of Joseph. When you immerse yourself in things that you enjoy so much, it's not work. It's just a blessing. And it's a blessing to work with the Book of Mormon and wonderful, absolutely wonderful people connected to it.
All three of us are very privileged to be able to do what we're doing. And it's a real privilege to make acquaintance, our friendship with you, Keith. I think, Robert, you and I have been doing this for 2 years now. Think about that. And this is also just, we're building something here. We're building bridges, and just like you're building bridges within the restoration with your foundation. And it's really important that we have these civil conversations. Part of the reason I came out there last time was I spoke at that Book of Mormon rally that Patrick McKay put on, and had evangelicals as well as people from just about every branch of the restoration in Independence was there. And that's the beautiful thing about this channel, about what we are all doing. I think we all kind of have, like, we all kind of see things very similarly in that regard as well. And so again, Keith, thanks so much for coming on the program today.
My pleasure.
Well, folks, I just want to remind you that don't forget, we're going to have links in the description to what we talked about, including his foundation. Also links for those of you who'd like to financially support the program, whether it's on PayPal or Patreon. And I want to thank those who are supporting the channel. Also a reminder, MormonBookReviews.com is our merch store. So you can get hot chocolate mugs, you can get ball caps, and all these wonderful things. Check out our merch store as well. And just remember, this is the most important thing, folks, is this. All the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.